Think we back. Hold, let me grab the headphones. I think we here. I think we live. We lit. Everything is great. Everything is live and in color. I can hear. Everything is solid. Where's my water at? Gotta make sure you got the water. All right, let's get to it. What's going on with y'all? It's popping. It's the man soul. Welcome back. Welcome back. And as the title says, we're gonna be talking about Cataclysm Classic Raid Comps class discussions, whatever may have you. But basically focused around building a raid comp. Now I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna preface this. It's gonna be a lot of prefacing. First preface, number one, don't take what I say as gospel. Obviously, you can make any raid comp you want and have some success. As long as your team is strong and you got good communication, you'll be moving. That's number one. Number two, this is all predicated on information we have so far. So basically, information that comes from original Cataclysm. There are some things I'm going to toss in the discussion. You know, just a little bit of speculation is to kind of drive the narrative, but again, we're just kind of building off of what we already know, not what we have seen released from Blizzard so far. Third preface, I got the Offspring with me. They might pop up in and out, but I'm gonna make sure they keep things copacetic. So, other than that, let's jump on in. And this is really going to be centered around 25 man. I'm gonna do a quick off the rip 10 man in the beginning here, so you can kind of get an idea. But it's just my opinion. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to 10 man and Cataclysm, 10 man is pretty hard, but there's a lot of options you can kind of mix and match, right? You don't have to have a set thing, in my opinion, to clear heroic. And I say that because during Cataclysm, I was a part of a 10 man heroic team that did very, very well. Like I said, I rated in top 200, so we did very well. We cleared all the content, and I don't think, like, yes, we had strong classes, but looking back on the comp that we had, I don't think it was something that was tailor made for 10 man, right? So keep that in mind. However, when you want to talk about 10 man, I think something like this, I'm going to just knock this off real quick. I think Blood DK is pretty strong. Not only in 10 man and 25, Blood just gets a lot of overhauling when it comes to Cataclysm and the talent trees, which we're going to be talking about sporadically throughout this stream. So Blood is really, really strong. It boasts a lot of immunities, as we know. We have Icebound Fortitude, we have Anti-Magic Shell, which is just, the Giga cooldown. We have Vamp Blood. We have now added to the repertoire Bone Armor. It comes from the Unholy Tree. We trade that with Unholy Frenzy, which, the purest Blood DKs might be sad to see go. I kind of am. It doesn't really bother me, though, because I always gave Blood Frenzy to the DPS, so it wasn't really something that, I didn't think that not having that ability meant Blood isn't viable, and Blood is for sure viable in Cataclysm, so you don't really miss Blood. And Bone Armor just makes more sense having it in the Blood tree. So Blood is just a no-brainer here. I think for utility purposes, I think you go Prot Paladin. Now, to be quite honest, in my opinion, Prot really isn't that strong. In at least the first tier of Cataclysm, Prot really isn't that strong. If anything, you can probably swap out that Prot for a Bear. Bears are really, really strong in Cataclysm, especially in the first tier. Like Bears, Druids generally don't need that much gear, because they're always supplemented by a certain form or passives that boost their effectiveness. And Bears, no different. It doesn't really need that much gear, but when it does have the gear, it smokes. So Bear is definitely a contender if you're looking to super min max. But I think for utility purposes, if you can't find a Bear Druid, Protection Paladin, you still get the Paladin buffs, you still get Divine Guardian, like you still get the normal Paladin things that you want to bring to a raid group. When it comes to healers, I think Restoration is really, really good. Oh, why did I remove Blood? That's crazy. I think Restoration is really, really good. Not only do they get a lot of buffs in their talents, but they also get some things removed, like what is that? I don't know the name of the talent off the top of my head, but the talent that makes it so when you have a rejuvenation or a wild growth tick, you have a chance to get back your resource. That's gone. But Resto does get some pretty significant changes. More notably, the change to Tranquility that makes it a raid cooldown now instead of just a party cooldown. So Resto is really, really good at healing the raid and in a small raid size, Tranquility's strength just goes up even more. I don't know why. I think I said this in my first Cataclysm buff video. I'm not really sure why Tranquility's not listed on this buff and debuff list here, but it should be because it's really, really strong. So I think Resto's really, really good. The next healer, it's kind of a toss up. Like you can kind of pick whatever. I think maybe the top two contenders is Resto Shaman or Disc Priest. Resto Shaman has access to Spirit Link Totem now, which is a really, really strong cooldown, but obviously it's nothing that Barrier can't do. But I think they're unique enough to where you can kind of decide, because Barrier just reduces all damage taken. Before it got nerfed, it was 30%. I think they're probably just going to implement the 25% version of it. So 25% for anyone standing under Barrier. Spirit Link Totem only reduces damage taken by 10%, but it swaps out the health. It always normalizes the health of people standing in it. So as an example, if I'm at 10% health and you're at 90% health and we both enter the Spirit Link Totem radius, it'll equalize out our health, which will be, I think we'll both end up at like 40 or 50%. So it's really good for when there's constant damage coming out and you need something to help stabilize the raid group, because it's constantly readjusting the raid health sizes. So no one's going to stay low forever. So if you happen to not cast on the right person, Spirit Link Totem is going to effectively heal them for you. So it's a really, really slept on AoE talent ability. So I think you're not wrong choosing either one of these guys. Obviously, Priest comes with its own unique buffs, Fortitude and Power Infusion. Resto has the Totem, so I don't think you're wrong with either one. You just kind of got to pick your poison. Min-maxers are probably going to go with the Disc Priest, because even though Resto's really strong with their utility, it's nothing like stopping damage. Absorbs are really strong, so I think they go with that. And then as far as the DPS is concerned, we'll do melee real quick. So melee, I think Frost definitely comes into a play here. Frost is a really, really solid spec throughout the entirety of Cataclysm. It also now brings the physical debuff. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick here. There it is. Yeah, so it brings Brittle Bones, which is the 4% physical damage increase. It's the same thing as what Combat and Arms brought, as you can see here. But now it's also brought by Frost. So Frost is really good. And Frost is stronger than both of those specs in phase 1, and honestly leading on too. There is a silver lining I'm going to talk about for Warrior, but Frost is really, really strong, especially with the buffs that they bring. The next melee I'll probably line out is Assassination, especially in phase 1, where Assassination is probably at its most powerful. That's arguable, because you do get legendary daggers at the end of the expansion, and they're probably bis for Assassination, even though they weren't bis for combat. So, but not including the legendaries, Assassination's probably at its height, or near its height in the first phase. So Assassination is really strong. You also get some pretty strong debuffs as well. You get the spell damage that previously was only brought by Death Knights and Druids. So now Assassination can bring that. So it's a really, really strong buff there. Not to mention that the talent overhaul that comes with Cataclysm was really, really good to Assassination. Like, Assassination really ate, and I can briefly show you real quick here. Thought I had it brought up. Let me see one of these tabs. Boop. Let's find out real quick. So when you go into Rogue and you pick the Assassination tree, obviously you get the Assassination-centric stuff. You get Mutilate, you get improved poisons, you get Assassination's Resolve, which increases your maximum energy and damage done while holding daggers. So that's kind of the thing that Cataclysm kind of implemented at the start, at least, is they really wanted to nail down who should use what, who should do what. Cataclysm is also the expansion where they started doing that. If you wear all of the same armor type, you get a buff. As an example, if you're a warrior and you wear all plate, you get a 5% increase to your main stat. So it just stopped warriors and paladins, and Death Knights never really did this, but even Death Knights from like trying to get mail and leather, like really leather, because leather had the like high agility, high armor pen and stuff like that. So it just kind of removed the plate classes from not only being able to take leather gear, but also use their own unique style of armor that no other class could really use. It really kind of just ironed that out. Hold on one second. I got to turn down this music in my ear real quick. Hold on. There we go. But going back to the assassination tree, yeah, it gets Vendetta, which is one of the more notable cooldowns for assassination. It puts a debuff on the target, it makes him take 20% increased damage. The only gripe that not only I but probably the Cattle Rogue community had with Vendetta was that fact that it was a debuff and not a buff. So if you put it on a boss or on a mob and it died early, or it went into a transitional period where you couldn't attack it, it kind of wasted Vendetta. Even though it's a relatively short cooldown, 2 minutes isn't that long. But Vendetta is a really strong buff for like lining up high damage phases. Cut to the Chase is really good, auto refreshing your slice and dice. Venomous Wounds gives you a nice return on energy. Like it's Assassination really lucked out with the talent change. One thing I do want to note is that if you've never played Cataclysm before and you don't know what I'm talking about with these talent changes, basically, TLDR, once you hit level 10, talent trees unlock as they would normally, but you then pick your specialization, and when you pick, you get a spec-centric ability, you get some passives centric only to that spec, and then when you hit, I believe, level 85, when you hit max, you get access to the mastery. So since we were just talking about assassination, in Assassination's case, you get Mutilate, which only Assassination can use. You get Improved Poisons and Assassination's Resolve, which is only for Assassination. These two passives are only for Assassination, so you don't get that increased deadly poison application or instant poison application chance if you go into combat or subtlety. Even if you do this, like if you put all your talent points into Assassination, or most of them, so you can unlock the sub-talent trees. I'm just doing a haphazard talent thing here. Yeah, so now I have access to the other two trees. Even if I put talent points in these other two trees, I still won't get the combat passive. So these passives are only centric to Assassination. That's just one of the things they did with Cataclysm. But yeah, Assassination is a pretty good pick for a melee. Now, when it comes to ranged, I think the two that you're probably going, like if you're min-maxing, the two that you're definitely going to want to consider and most likely have, Survival and Shadow. They just do really high damage on both spectrums of AoE and single target, and it doesn't really change throughout the entirety of Cataclysm. There are some things that do, like Arcane does come into its own, especially in phase 2, or not phase 2, but the next tier 12, when Firelands releases, and they get their better set bonuses and they get access to Dragon's Wrath, even though Shadow has access to that too. Like it's just a different ball game when Firelands opens. But Shadow and Survival are always consistent, especially in the first phase where things are pretty early, the power level is pretty low. Like these guys really are going to compete. So having these two guys are really good for a 10-man. And then as far as the last two slots, I would probably give it to the Mage, Fire to start with, and then maybe switch over to Arcane when phase 2 hits. But Fire to start with, because now you have access to Critical Mass, which is the 5% spell buff. They changed a lot of the buffs. Like, I know I'm going to eventually redo it, but if you want to know in detail all of the buff changes, I have a video on my channel where it's like 41 minutes. The reason why I'm going to change it is because I think it's too long. I want to break it up. But you want to go check it out. I talk in depth and in detail about every single buff, the raid buffs, the offensive buffs, the single player buffs. I'll talk about all that stuff. But you get the 5% crit. You also get Time Warp or Heroism, because obviously there's no Shaman here. So you get Heroism if you bring a Mage. And Fire's pretty good. Fire also benefits from the talent revamp. The problem with Fire is that Arcane just becomes better. So nothing really happens to Fire. It's just Arcane just happens to become better. And then for the last slot, I would probably go Affliction. Affliction still is a really strong spec. It still has one of, if probably not the best execute style damage. So if you're trying to min-max, Affliction is really good. And obviously you get all the Warlock tricks. You get Health Stones. You get the extra pet buffs and stuff like that. But you just get the really strong execute damage. So this is kind of what a 10-man would look like. Obviously, you don't have to do this. You can pick whatever you want. You can pick whatever tank you want. You can pick whatever healer you want. You can pick whatever combination of DPS you want. I would say for maybe not the bleeding edge, because I'm sure there's some things that I'm missing when it comes to bleeding edge. But when it comes to when it comes to at least high progressing guilds, this is a pretty solid setup. I would say probably a change that you can make is that You could chop out the assassination rogue for like the ret paladin. Now you get your 3% damage. Yeah, you can do things like that. So that is the 10 man. Now we're gonna jump into the 25 man. So let's clear all this nonsense out. Let me just change some things over here. Bet. Okay. So now when we're talking 25 man, again, my word is not gospel. You don't have to adhere to every single thing that I'm saying. This is like maybe not for world first stuff, maybe just for high competitive server stuff. Like if you want to be top 10 on your server or top 20 on your server, this is probably the stream for you. But again, you can go in and use whatever comp that you like. But I'm going to start with the tanks because they're just the easiest to talk about. And when it comes to 25 man, I think Blood and Feral are just really strong. Especially Feral. Feral is a really strong spec early Cataclysm, even leading into later versions of the game. Now, not versions, but later phases of the game. Now, I will say this. The block tanks, the paladins, and the warriors, they do catch up significantly, especially once you start getting closer to Dragon Soul and like the end time dungeons release and stuff like that. Like, paladins and warriors do catch up, especially, like, we used a warrior tank for our heroic Deathwind kill, like the server first heroic Deathwind kill. So, we did do that. So, you can use whatever you want. I think just to have the easiest route, Blood and Feral are the way to go. And they don't compete with gear, right? Like Blood is not going to take anything from Feral. Feral's not going to take anything from Blood. You might have some discrepancy with tank trinkets, but who cares? Like it's two of y'all, figure it out. When it comes to the healers, let's talk about it. So I'm going to put in the specs that I think would work, and then we talk about them individually quick. So Restoration, definitely. Discipline, let's put these guys down here, group 5. Restoration and Discipline definitely get a nod. Restoration Shaman also gets a nod. Holy Paladin, my bad. And Holy Priest. I don't think there is any healer spec that I would double up on, especially because Cataclysm still is early enough in WoW's I guess, career. To that, there's still not a lot of things that double up, right? You can't have 2 powered shields on the same person because a weakened soul. You can't have 2 earth shields on the same person because one will override the other. I'm not entirely sure if you can have 2 beacons on the same person. Probably can. I don't think they would do that to the paladin. But talking about it, so the Resto Shaman and the Resto Druid, not Resto Druid. The Resto, not Resto Shaman. Resto Druid and Holy Priest are really, really strong raid healers. So Holy Priest gets a kind of overhaul. They have a new system called chakras, and it's kind of like healer stances. So you use one stance for single target. You get a single target spell. If you switch your chakra, you get an AoE spell. I believe it's called Serenity and Sanctuary. I think Serenity's still in the game. Sanctuary, I don't think is in the game anymore. I don't think it's in Dragonflight. But nevertheless, these two are really good blanket healers, not only just because of their innate abilities, but also because of their masteries, especially like Holy Priest. Holy Priest gets the Echo of Light mastery. For every heal they do, it'll leave a small hot on you. It's really good just for incidental blanket healing. And something I want to note about Cataclysm, the raid style, not only is there a lot of burst damage, there's a lot of just raid damage going out. So having 5 healers and having healers who can kind of do a mix of both becomes really important. So for the blanket style raid healers, these guys are the ones. For the single target tank healers, there's no beating a Holy Paladin. Like, I'm sorry. Even though Kata is the expansion that they do get their AoE, like they get Holy Radiance, they get the introduction of Holy Power that helps them out. But there's still no beating the Holy Paladin when it comes to single target tank healing. Like it's almost near mandatory because of how much burst damage is going out. So if you want a single target healer, you want a triage healer, the Paladin still is the king. Restoration and Discipline have their own niches. So Discipline obviously is the only healer that really maximizes the use of Absorb, so that's always damage reduction. Plus they bring the most powerful raid cooldown in the game, Powered Barrier. As you can see here, damage taken reduced by 25%, and it doesn't interrupt. You have immunity to spell pushback when you're under it. Really, really strong for high damage phases that require your healers to just be constantly casting. So Barrier needs to be there. Restoration Shamans are really good triage healers thanks to Chain Heal. They can heal melee really effectively with 1 GCD. They can heal a group of range really effectively 1 GCD. They have access to Healing Rain, which is a really strong AoE placement heal. Also, Restoration Druid, not Shaman, gets Efflow, so there's a lot of ground effects going on. You have Efflorescence, you have Holy Word Sanctuary, you have Healing Rain. There's a lot of ground effects happening here. It just goes to show how much AoE healing is going to be needed in some of these raids. But Restoration Shaman still is a good triage healer. In fact, I can probably show the Restoration Shaman talent tree here, so I can show you real quick. Shaman, so you can see what I'm kind of talking about. So they still get Earth Shield, they still get Purification, they still get Meditation. We're going to jump into the tree here. They also get Riptide. Riptide is really strong. And they get Spirit Link Totem. Spirit Link Totem is probably the magnum opus of this talent tree because it's such a potent talent. I talked about it earlier in the stream if you missed it, but I'll go over here real quick. So Spirit Link is another totem. It reduces all damage taken by 10%, but more importantly, it redistributes all the health of everyone standing in it. So again, if I'm playing a tune and I'm at 10% and another character is at 90% and we both enter the Spirit Link Totem or just drop on top of us, it'll equal out our health. And it will consistently do that for the duration of the spell. So in this case, it's 6 seconds. And that's really important because obviously 5 people can't heal every single person in the raid group at all times. There's going to be somebody that gets missed from one cast or another. Hopefully they have a hot on them to help them out. That's what hots are for. But there's always going to be someone who needs a heal that might not get it, and Spirit Link is kind of helpful in that regard when there's a lot of raid damage going out, because if a healer chooses to heal me over the next person and that person doesn't get a heal, my health is just going to get redistributed to them. So it's a really, really potent cooldown. There's really nothing like it, to be quite honest. Go back here. So Restoration gets the nod. Now, again, you can do whatever you want for your raid comp. I think having one of each of the healer just really strengthens the core. If you feel like you want more blanket healing and you opt to get a second Resto Druid over a Holy Priest, by all means, do your thing. Again, you can kind of mix and match wherever you want. I don't think there's a healer I would double up on necessarily. I think I would probably work this to my advantage because you get something from each. So I think that's what I'll leave it at that there. Now let's talk about the DPS. I think it's probably easier to talk about, for me anyway, it's easier to talk about the melee first. And surprise, surprise, no surprise here. I think Frost and Unholy definitely get spots if you're looking for melee. They're very, very strong. Death Knights are just strong in Cataclysm. They don't have a weak point, and as you get better gear and as the tier set goes along, even without a legendary, they just get stronger. They just continually getting stronger. They always are consistent high damage. They always have good damage profiles. The one drawback about Death Knights is that they really aren't mobile, right? So if they need to get from point A to point B really fast, it's not going to happen for a Death Knight, right? But outside of that, Frost and Unholy are really strong. I will say this, though, for Unholy, you don't need an Unholy DK anymore to help spread the magic debuff now, because Starfall now spreads Earth and Moon, so you get that 8% magic debuff on everybody via Starfall. You don't need Pestilence. So there's that, but it doesn't diminish Unholy in my opinion. It's just something that I would note. Something else I want to note with Frost DKs, because they get Howling Blast and because a lot of cheese strats have kiting involved in it, Death Knights effectively become the best kiters, and I'll show you why. That's not why. That's some tab that I had opened. Where is it? There it is. Chillblains. So Chillblains, any target that's affected by Frost Fever gets their movement speed reduced by 50% when you max out this talent. And Chains of Ice causes any target you hit to be rooted. This is really, really strong. In fact, it earned Death Knights the nickname Death Kite because they were just really, really good at kiting things. And the next thing is you have Howling Blast. Howling Blast will apply Frost Fever, which will slow everything that Howling Blast hits. So it's really, really powerful. It's a really powerful slow, and I'm sure there's going to be some kite strats that when Cataclysm comes out, I'm sure they're going to resurface at some point. I think prominent bosses that my guild use kite strats on: Heroic Magma, the worm boss in Blackwing Descent, where he spawns the ads. I know for a fact I was playing Death Knight and I had to kite. I had to kite the worms, make sure I had threat on them, and run around in the circle for 6 minutes because I had to make sure those worms didn't hit anybody. Same thing with the Conclave of the Four Winds, the where Alakir's at. On one of the platforms, the boss spawned flower ads, and if you touched them, they exploded or they did like an explosion. And I had to pick up threat and run around in a circle for 6 minutes, or not 6 minutes in that fight, but like 2 minutes because Death Knights were just the best kiters, and I was a Worgen too, so I had a sprint as well. So yeah, it was nutty. But aside from the kite shenanigans, Frost DK and Unholy are pretty solid. So I think they earn spots there. The next melee I'll talk about is the Retribution Paladin. So Ret gets a lot of nice overhaul. Most notably, probably the addition to Holy Power. Now they do get things like Templar's Verdict, they get Zealotry, they get a few bells and whistles, but I think Holy Power is probably the most notable thing. Plus, it's a Paladin. It's gonna bring buffs that you can't really, well, now in Cataclysm, we're going to talk about it, but it brings buffs that you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else under normal circumstances. So when you couple that with it already doing pretty solid damage, it's not the best on like high amounts of cleave. Like once you go beyond like 4 targets, right? Like Divine Storm doesn't really do that great beyond that certain threat. No, I'm sorry. I'm saying it backwards. If you have like 2 to 3 target cleave, Ret kind of falters a little bit, but when you have a lot of things to cleave off of for Divine Storm, it becomes pretty solid. And it's still really strong with its burst. It still has Avenging Wrath. It still has some pretty cool things. So it's a pretty solid melee when it comes to that regard. Pardon me. The next one I'll mention, I think I'll mention Assassination too. Assassination, like I said before, for the 10-man breakdown, it's really strong. It's just it benefits a lot from the talent revamp, and it's solid from the gate. Now, there is something I do want to talk about, and it's a silver lining because I don't know how Blizzard is going to implement this. I'm going to take out Assassination real quick. So talking about the Warriors aren't really the greatest in the first tier because they're very gear dependent. You kind of need a lot of good gear for Warriors to be great. So early progression, mid progression, not really the greatest for a Warrior. The silver lining for this is the Arms Warrior because of the introduction to Mastery. And again, I don't know if Blizzard is going to introduce this version of Mastery to Arms, but I'm going to show you real quick. I have the tab open up here, so let's look at it real quick. So as you can see, I have all of the these are all of the removed masteries, right? These are all masteries that existed at one point but are now gone. And in Cataclysm, when it first released, Arms had the Strikes of Opportunity mastery. And basically you had a chance, depending on what your mastery level was, to do a melee attack for 100% of the damage, right? And this was incredibly strong because Mastery in and of itself kind of just scales pretty well, right? If you have a lot, you're gonna see pretty good effects and gains from Mastery for most classes. Every single class doesn't scale great with Mastery, but Arms really did, and their Strikes of Opportunity was just mowing down targets. So I don't know if we're going to get this version of Mastery for Arms. I don't know if that's going to be the case. So hashtag some changes. If they do, if Arms gets Strikes of Opportunity, I would argue that you could probably bring a Warrior, and once they get some gear, they're going to be okay. So that's the silver lining for Warriors. Fun fact, this really has nothing to do with Cata raid comp, but fun fact, Arms has the second most changes to their mastery. The first one is Shadow. You can see it here. Shadow has had a mastery change damn near every expansion. They had They got Shadow Orbs in the beginning in Cataclysm. Then it changed to Shadow Recall and Miss. Then it changed to Mental Anguish and WAD. Then it changed to Mastery Madness in Legion. And then they have whatever they have now from Shadowlands and onward. But they had 4 mastery changes for almost every single expansion. It's kind of crazy. So Warriors, Arms kind of had the same thing. They had it changed in WAD. They had it changed in Legion, but it's not as egregious as Shadow. Just want to throw that out there. Back to the comp. So yeah, Arms gets the silver lining, but again, if we don't get that Strikes of Opportunity, I probably wouldn't bring one. Let me remove this. What did I have in there before? I had Assassination, right? Boom. And this is where I kind of leave it up to the viewer, you guys out there, because for most 25-man comps, it was really up to y'all to decide how much melee you're going to bring. Traditionally speaking, you really weren't going to go over 4 or 5. I'm going to be honest with you. We have 4 here. You could get that 5th. I'll use the little ambiguous melee thing here. You could get the 5th, but for a lot of the fights in Cataclysm, if you had a high-performing ranged, it was just always better to bring ranged, because range could attack from from a further distance, so they were almost always able to attack. They didn't have to run and chase anything, especially with ads. Pardon me. Range can swap to an ad and swap to a target, to a boss, faster than the melee could run back and forth, unless the ad was tanked on top of it. And some mechanics you couldn't tank the ad next to the boss. So I'll leave it up to you guys to decide whether or not you want to bring a 5th melee. I think I'm going to remove that 5th melee here and leave it at 4th. If there was a 5th melee I would bring, I'd probably go Feral. Probably do the Feral Cat, because you're not bringing the Arms Warrior, right? So you need that bleed damage from somewhere. So, and as you can see all the things that you bring here. But yeah, you need that bleed damage from somewhere, and I think the cat does it for you. Let's go. I think the one thing I do want to talk about, the only melee that you probably would not consider is Subtlety. Unfortunately, Subtlety just doesn't do enough PvE wise yet to be viable, and it's unfortunate because Subtlety got a buff. They get where is it? Let me find it. There it is. They get Honor Among Thieves. Increase 5% crit chance. It does the same exact thing as Leader of the Pack, Rampage, all this other stuff, but it's just not enough to bring Subtlety to fruition, in my opinion. So Subtlety is probably the one spec that one of 2 that you really wouldn't consider. But that's really it for the melee. I think both Death Knight specs are a shoo-in. I think Ret Paladin's a shoo-in, and Assassination is really good. Moving on to the range side. The easiest ones to pick out the way that I think you'll probably double up on, Hunter, easily. Survival is just too strong to be ignored. It does really good on single target. It is really good on AoE. It has Trap Launcher now. I mean, it kind of has that in Wrath, but it has the real Trap Launcher now. It's just a solid spec. So I do want to say that. I hear my offspring. Hello, first offspring.
Dad, can I go to the bathroom?
Good. What are you asking me to do?
Daddy, live my racetrack.
Okay. Go to the bathroom. So yeah, I think Survival is definitely a shoo-in to be on any raid comp for 25 minutes. And Hunter is really easy to double up on, because not only do they wear mail, right? So even if you have 2 of them, they don't have a lot of gear competition, right? They wear mail. So when mail items drop, you can kind of figure it out for yourself if you're using like Loot Council or something like that. Like, it's not hard to assign Hunter gear, right? And it's easy because if you have the first Hunter get lucky with a really nice armor piece or a really nice weapon, the next Hunter knows he's definitely going to get it, he or she. So it's not even a long wait for the next gear. So it's just really good. They're really strong. Survival, yeah, it's just really, really strong. The next one that's really, really strong that you're probably going to have 1 or 2 of is Shadow Priest. Quite easily. Shadow gets a lot of buffs in Cataclysm. So first things first, let's look at what they bring to the table at their utility. So the reason why Shadow Form is on here is because Shadow now brings the 5% haste buff, right? It's not just Shamans. It's Shadow Priest can also do it now. Of course, they bring Power Word Fortitude. They bring improved Mind Blast. My bad. Let me think. Where is improved Mind Blast? I don't really remember what that one does. I can't remember what improved Mind Blast does. I think it's the healing one. It might be, but we'll get back to that. I don't want to slow down the stream. Vampiric Touch is like replenishment. They get Hymn of Hope. They get Divine Hymn. They get Vamp Embrace for trickle healing. They have a Cure Disease. They have Master Spell, and they have a Magic Dispel. So you get a lot of utility when you get Shadow. Plus the fact that Shadow does an amazing amount of damage thanks to their Mastery Shadow Orbs. We talked about all of the Mastery changes that Shadow got briefly. Maybe I'll go over it again real quick. But the TLDR for Shadow Mastery is, you know what? No, before I even do a TLDR, let me just go highlight it again. Here it is. And actually, there's a better explanation in the actual talent tree here. So here you go. So if you want to read the tooltip here, you got it. But basically, your dots in your Mind Flay, your Shadow Orb and your Mind Flay have a chance to give you a Shadow Orb, and your Mind Blast or Mind Spike. Mind Spike is a new spell. Consumes the Shadow Orb, and it deals more damage per Shadow Orb. You can only have a maximum of 3. So if you're looking at these number values, that 22% can go up to 66% at its height, and it grants you 22% increased periodic damage. So all of your dots are going to be doing a massive amount of damage per Shadow, not per Shadow Orb, I'm not sure if it's per Shadow Orb, but it's going to be doing a massive amount of damage. Your Devouring Plague is going to be hitting like mag trucks. All of that. Not only that, but there was a buff to Mind Seer. Mind Seer now also does damage to the target that it's on, not just so you don't have to cast it on a friendly target. You don't have to worry about not hitting the primary target. It actually does damage to the primary target now too. So Shadow is just out of control. Plus, as a side note, there's a legendary Dragon's Wrath. If you give a Shadow Priest Dragon's Wrath, they're going to be monsters. In my opinion, not the strongest with Dragon's Wrath, but absolutely solid. So Shadow's another one you could double up on. I haven't seen too many double Shadow Priests, but it's not something that you can that is bad. So I would say these are the 2 specs that I would be comfortable for range doubling up on. The next one I would do is Fire Mage. Fire Mage is really strong. It also really benefits from the talent point spread. They also bring a fair amount of buffs on their own. That, of course, they bring Heroism now to get Time Warp. They get Critical Mass, which is the 5% spell crit. They have a spell steal, and they have a Remove Curse. So Fire is really good. Plus, their Combustion got reworked as well. Let me go into the talent tree here. Where is it? There it is. So their Combustion got reworked. It no longer consumes the fire damage you do, so you can front load a lot of your fire damage when you hit Combustion and just leave a very, very large Combustion on the target, dealing a lot of damage. So it's a really strong spec. It doesn't stay that way. Like I said, eventually Arcane becomes the optimal spec, but nothing happens to fire that doesn't make it good. It's just the fact that Arcane becomes better. Speaking of Arcane, Arcane is a spec that you could invest in. You still get the traditional Arcane stuff like the 3% magic, not 3% magic, 3% total damage from Arcane Tactics. You get Focus Magic, which you can only get from Arcane Mages now because of the way the Cata talent trees work. You can only get Focus Magic and if you bring an Arcane Mage. So keep that in mind. And Arcane still does solid damage. So it's overshadowed by Fire a little bit in phase 1, but once you get to the later phases, Arcane becomes its own in and of itself. Next spec, Elemental. Elemental, why did it remove the Survival Hunter? There we go. So Elemental is a gift and a curse, kind of like what kind of plagues shamans for a long time, is the fact that they always start out very powerful. They just have horrible scaling. And that's really kind of the case with Elemental. It starts off really, really strong. But as time goes on, tiers change, you get different gear. It just does not reach where it's supposed to go. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say the other ranged specs just surpass it. especially in the Firelands Dragon Soul era. Like once Dragon Wrath becomes a thing, there's no catching a mage with Dragon's Wrath. There's no catching a Shadow Priest with Dragon's Wrath. Like Elemental just can't do it. However, in the beginning, Elemental is really, really powerful. And if we look at the utility that it brings, of course you get all the totems. You get Strength of Earth, Wind, Fury, Totem of Wrath, things like that. Speaking of Totem of Wrath, I do want to talk about that real quick. So Totem of Wrath brings kind of a unique buff that it's shared with Demonic Pact, where it's just a 10% flat spell power increase. I know when you hear Demonic Pact, you think, oh, the more spell power the Warlock has, the more spell power it gives. It don't work like that no more. It's just 10% spell power, hands down. So if you can't get your hands on a Warlock, Elemental Shaman might be the way to go if you want that 10% spell power increase. But Elemental does have a lot of utility going for it. As you can see here, it brings all of its totems. It brings an offensive purge, things like that. It's just the scaling of it. Eventually, they'll become not the weakest link, but a link that you're going to be analyzing the usefulness of. We'll leave it like that. Like obviously, whoever's piloting the shaman is going to make it work or not make it work. But if we're just comparing apples to apples, Elemental just doesn't scale the best. All right, silver lining time. So there is a silver lining for one of the other hunter specs, and that's Beast Mastery. So Beast Mastery, and I'm going to say this before I get into it. I don't like the change that they did with hunter pets, and it kind of revolves around Beast Mastery, not the spec itself, just the pets. So the reason why you would consider a Beast Mastery hunter is to fill in a gap of a buff that you need, right? If you can't get like a certain class, the next best thing is to get a Beast Mastery hunter and have them bring whatever pet is associated with the buff that you're trying to get. And as you can see here, this is all of the buffs that a Beast Mastery hunter could potentially bring. Embrace of the Shell Spider, which is just another King's. Roar of Courage, which is kind of like a Blessing of Might, Horn of Winter style buff. Terrifying Roar / Fury Howl is crit. Ancient Hysteria is heroism. Karaji Fortitude is the powered Fortitude stamina buff. Stampede Tendon Rip Gore is the bleed. Acid Spit is armor reduction. I don't remember what Fire or Lightning Breath is. I'm gonna be honest with you. I have to go back and look at that one. Corrosive Spit Tear Armor. I could have swore that's what Acid Spit did / Ravage, but I'll double check on both of these. And Dust Cloud, I also don't know what that is. Monstrous Bite is the what is it? Mortal Strike debuff. But as you can see here, the pet can bring a plethora of buffs. And again, I think this is a gift and a curse because I don't think a hunter should be able to just have a Swiss Army knife of buffs in their back pocket. I'm going to be honest with you. That sounds like hate. It's not, I promise you. Like, I don't have a problem with hunters in general. I just have a problem with this style of game design. I don't think there should just be a Swiss Army knife of buffs. Just my personal opinion. However, if you can make use of it, go for it, right? If you can't get, as an example, I'm trying to think what's a pretty obscure buff here. Not Fortitude, because you're gonna have a priest, some rendition of priest. We'll just say heroism. If you can't get a heroism, and you need a heroism, and you can't find a shaman, you can't get a mage, the Ancient Hysteria from a Core Hound might be it. Excuse me, buddy. Could you take that in your room? Thank you, bud. Can you close the door, please? Thank you, sir. He's been dying to play this game that I got him. I'll have to play with him a little bit later. But anyway, yeah, the hunter might be that final keynote to a buff that you want. So I'm not going to shit on it too much, but I just don't like this style of game design because I feel like Cataclysm probably was the kickoff point for a lot of homogenization in WoW, or at least that era. Not right now. I feel like in Dragonflight, even in Shadowlands, a lot of the classes had, like, they felt different enough to where you couldn't really say that Affliction played the same as Shadow Priest, right? You can't say that. You can't say Fire Mage plays the same as Destro, right? So, but this was the start of that homogenization era, in my opinion. So that's the silver lining for hunters. But we're gonna remove Beastmaster because we're gonna pretend like we're great raiders and stuff, and we can just have what we want at all times as part of a raid comp. So as far as the next class are concerned, definitely Affliction. As I said for the 10-man part of this stream, Affliction still has one of, if not the best execute damage profiles, and its damage before the execute is pretty solid. So you can't go wrong with Warlocks. I'll also throw in Demonology there because I think this is interchangeable. Actually, let me add one more real quick. Boom. These two are interchangeable, right? So you could not have an Elemental Shaman and have a balance drill. Let's say you're really, really worried about elemental scaling and you feel like once phase 1 or tier 1 is over, what is it, tier 11's over, elemental's just going to go down the drain and you're worried about it and you want to bring a balance druid instead, you can just remove you and just add that. You're going to want the 10% spell power from somewhere, and the best place to get it, in my opinion, is the Demonology Warlock. So, and not for that reason, but also Demonology also has pretty good single target and AoE damage profiles. Although I will say their AoE really is, their profile is like stacked AoE. Like if things are spread out, Demonology really isn't the best for like mowing down things that are spread out. But when it comes to stacked AoE, thanks to like things like, you know, Hand of Gul'dan, the new Hand of Gul'dan, the new abilities you get from being in meta form, like those really, really matter. So stacked AoE and single target, can't go wrong with Demonology Warlock. Plus they bring their demonic pack, they bring the curse of elements, they bring the curse of weakness. So there you have that. And then for the, like, once you have this kind of lineup, the last 3 slots are really to your discretion, to be quite honest with you. So if you say, all right, I'm at a point now where I have all of these specs in place. This is the buildup that I have. And now I have 3 spec wiggle room. You can kind of mix whatever you want. If you want to add that 5th melee and you want to go for the arms warrior just in case arms gets that strikes of opportunity and they become busted, get the arms warrior. If you want to bring another, like I said with the Swiss Army knife thing, if you want to bring a Beastmaster Hunter just to make sure you absolutely have all of the buffs taken care of, bring it. If you want to change it up, right, because you really want this Divine Guardian, right, let's say you really want this, you take out the Pharaoh, you put in the Protection Paladin, and now you really got some wiggle room, right? And you really, even though I don't know, for Bleeding Edge, I don't know if I would do Prop Paladin. Prop Paladins are pretty minor when it comes to the beginning. Thank you, buddy.
Okay.
I'm almost done. Why don't you go finish playing your room? Take your monster truck with you. Hey, take that too. Thank you.
Days off for Caden.
Yeah, he's sleeping. Go in your room. Children. Dad gamer life, if you know, you know. But anyway, now you really have wiggle room. So I would definitely use that to your advantage. Here's what I would say. I'm going to use these 3 spots on specs that I wouldn't necessarily bring. Number 1, Frost Mage. That's Destruction. Whoops, my bad. Frost Mage. Frost Mage, it's just not there yet. We haven't gotten to the world where Frost is actually good in PvE yet. That doesn't come for some time. So Frost Mage is probably something you wouldn't consider. I'll said it before, but I'll say it again. Subtlety is another spec that you probably wouldn't consider. Even with the Honor Among Thieves buff, I don't think Subtlety does enough damage. It brings enough that the other rogue specs don't do, besides the fact that it does less damage than the other 2. I don't think it brings enough to consider at this point. Is there another spec I want to bring? I want to outline. Oh, the Warriors spec. So like I said, with arms, if they get strikes of opportunity, it's something you could consider. You could bring Fury. Like I said, Warriors are really gear dependent. So you're not going to probably see what the performance that you want to see out of your Warriors in the beginning. As time goes on, kind of like how it was in Wrath. Like Warriors were kind of doo-doo in the beginning of Wrath, but as time went on, they got more armor pen. They became great. So if you want to wait for that greatness, by all means, that's up to y'all. But I don't know if from the gate they're not that strong. And I'll give an honorable, or maybe I don't know what you want, if you want to call it honorable or dishonorable, to Enhance. So to me, Enhanced isn't really the greatest when it comes to phase one, and because shamans have that scaling issue, it's just gonna continue. And the reason why it's not that they're bad. Like I think they're in a better position like than Ward, than the Fury spec, than the Subtlety spec, than the Frost spec. So you could bring an enhanced shaman, right? The problem is they don't really bring anything that you don't already have. That's kind of the problem, especially if you have this particular setup that we've shown here. Like if let me remove this. If I remove this and I remove this, as you can see, we have all of the buffs covered. So bringing in an enhanced shaman would strictly be just because you really want to see an enhanced shaman in your raid group. It wouldn't be because you're missing something or their damage profile is that high that you would really want to see one. It would just be, hey, maybe a really good enhanced shaman applied and we ain't got one. Bring them. It'd be on that kind of level. It really wouldn't be nothing more than that, right? Because like you could talk about Unleash Life, but not Unleash Life, Unleash Rage, but the problem here is look at everything that comes with Unleash Rage. If you have a Blood DK, if you have a Paladin, you already got that buff. If you have a Resto Shaman, you have all the totems. So there's no real reason to bring an Enhanced Shaman other than the fact that you just want to see an Enhanced Shaman in your raid group. So what I'll do here for the last 3 spots is I'll do it like this. I'll do 1 melee, 2 range, and you can just pick your poison there. But give me 1 second. Let me tend to this child real fast. The life of a dad gamer never gets old. You heard it here first, folks. But back to the point, yes. So I would leave these 3 spots kind of in your discretion. Like I said, for this particular setup, I'm running 4 melee. You could get that 5th, and then you can add 2 ranged. Let me get a swig real quick. Now, there are a couple key notes that I want to talk about for certain classes. And it really kind of comes down to what I think is going to happen when it comes to like scaling and balancing and things like that. I think throughout throughout WoW Classic's lifespan, Blizzard has gotten a lot more comfortable with the idea of changes. Obviously, we saw it, right? In Vanilla, not that much changes, right? Very little. Pardon me, next to none. TBC, not that many. Wrath comes around, you get little changes here. You get a glyph for the Ret Paladins, allowing them to use their Hand of Reckoning. You get a glyph for the Feral Druids to instantly get Omen of Clarity. You get the legendary changes, right? There are changes that aren't super grandiose but potent, and I think we're going to see that same style of development, design, and balancing in Kata. And that's what makes me think that we're not going to see the Strikes of Opportunity for Mastery version of ARMS, because it didn't make it like I don't know. I feel like if we do see it, it'll be very scaled back, in my opinion. Let me actually drop this down, and we will go. Yeah, we'll go here. What is this nonsense? So with that being said, yeah, I don't think we see this version. Same thing with there was another thing they did with Colossus Smash, which is like one of the new abilities for arms. In the beginning, Colossus Smash reduced, like when you hit the target, it reduced the armor by 100% for the duration of the debuff. I don't remember. Let me see if I can find the actually before I get into Colossus Smash, let me look at the current Arms Warrior Mastery. Yeah, I don't think we're getting that. Like the Deep Wounds Mastery, I don't think we're getting that. But we might. We might. Blizzard can literally do anything. So it's really not the first thing. It's like one of the more notable abilities. So Colossus Smash. Let's see. So there's the PvP change that ignores 100% of non-parasites. So judging by this, they might, because if it made it to 4.3, they might allow it, because at some point they changed Colossus Smash from 100% to 80% for PvE. And you can probably read ahead up here. I will say this, because it made it to 4.3, which now that kind of opens the gate of Strikes of Opportunity lasting to lasting for Cataclysm Classic, because Strikes of Opportunity didn't get removed for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go back and see, when did they remove Strikes of Opportunity? Let me see. Oh no, not where is it? Removed masteries. They removed it in patch 6.0. That's MOP. So it's tough. It's tough. But going back to the composition side of things, I don't think this is too controversial. There's definitely wiggle room, like I said, especially like with the tanks and the healers. Like you don't need. Actually, let me change that out. Where is it? You don't need a bear tank or a blood DK. You can do whatever. Like I said, in my 10-man comp, we had a prot warrior, and he was great. He was great. We had a prot warrior and a prot paladin, actually. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. And then eventually we had a prot warrior and a prot paladin. Then it changed to hold on. Tier 11, we had a paladin and a bear druid. Tier 12 in Firelands, that changed from a bear druid to a paladin and a warrior. And then when Dragon Soul came out, believe this or not, we had double prot warrior. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. But by then, prot warriors were really strong. Critical block was amazing. There was some pretty significant ad fights where warriors were just really, really strong at that. So keep that in mind. But yeah, like I said, this is really kind of it for what I would consider an ideal comp, where you want, like, you have all the things. Like the only thing you don't have is Divine Guardian, which is good, but it's not. I would say you'll be all right. We have a lot to go around here. We have Powered Barrier, we have Spirit Link, we have the revamped Tranquility, we have a Holy Priest. Like there's a lot of things we have in this comp that I think make up for just not having Divine Guardian, to be quite honest with you. So this is it, and you still have wiggle room for the 3 slots. So if you don't want a bear, you don't want a blood, get something else. You can swap out the blood for a protection paladin, and then get that enhanced shaman that you want so bad, and get your attack power buff right then and there. So that's really, really it. I think that's it for this section of the stream. I wanted to do more Cataclysm content anyway, even though I'm not that excited. Like, it's still low on my priority list in terms of wanting to play it. I still am going to do some Cataclysm content, because it maybe as the time goes on, it provides build up, I'll get more excited about it. So we're going to see. But until then, I'm still going to do Cataclysm content. I'm still going to do Season of Discovery content. That's probably going to be the next stream. Season of Discovery, like the level 40 talent builds and stuff like that. Like what I think is going to be great. Yeah, that's definitely going to be the next stream. But that being said, guys, that's it for the stream. If you joined me from the start to finish, I appreciate you. If you came through in the middle, I appreciate you. If you watched this on a watch back, I appreciate it. Same as always. Y'all been great. I've been Soul, and I'm out. Peace. I might be streaming later tonight too. Keep that in mind. I'll put it up. But later.